Welcome to the West Australian Grand Lodge Media Group, and we have another regular podcast. This time it's stretching across the ditch, and we are joined with the Grand Master of New Zealand, Most Worshipful Brother Graham Wrigley. Graham, welcome and thank you for participating.
Thank you, Peter. Great opportunity to communicate with you in these very trying times, so a great opportunity.
It's also a very special occasion. Last time we had the Grand Master of Queensland, now the Grand Master of New Zealand. But there's a special thanks that I want to give to the Grand Master of New Zealand and all the Brethren of New Zealand for their contribution to the bushfire appeals in Australia. And they've made a significant donation to each of the mainland states at those states' requests. And Western Australia was one of the recipients. So we'd like to thank you not only on behalf of the Brethren and myself, but also all the citizens of Western Australia, especially the victims of the bushfires. Thank you, and please pass on our thanks to all the Brethren of New Zealand for their massive contribution they've given to us in Australia.
Look, thanks, Peter. It was something that we were pleased to do. It just goes to show how severe those fires were. And as you know, I'm an ex-firefighter, former fire chief for Wellington, but we could see the smoke and the red glow in the skies from our city. And I live in Christchurch, which is on the other side of the island. And we could see certainly what you were going through. The collection we sent across to the Grand Lodges of Australia was raised by our individual lodges, and the Grand Lodge just topped it up. And we were pleased to contribute to the work that you're doing, because it does make for a safer community and does make the communities better connected with their welfare and the needs that they've got at the moment. So we were pleased to partake in that.
That's great, and it's going to be put to good use. I think I explained to you before, we originally started with our bushfire appeal for Western Australia only, and when it became such a national disaster, we changed it to a national appeal, but we also kept aside a certain sum just for Western Australia.
Yes.
We've given a large donation to the Salvo's national appeal, and we've just been given some details of where they're spending their national fundraising. But in Western Australia, we're looking at options of where we're going to spend it. We could be looking at the Royal Flying Doctor Service, or direct donations to local firefighters out in the rural areas, or even, say, the Salvos, which are building special kitchens, mobile kitchens, to take into disaster area and to help out, feed them. And we always see the Salvos out there helping out, handing out blankets and cups of coffee and meals to all the people during these natural disasters. So your contribution will be going to the West Australian Pacific support. And again, it's a great example of how Freemasonry across the world has stepped up to help out people in natural disasters. And again, your brethren have done a great job, and we thank you very much for that.
Yeah, look, we're all a part of the same fraternity, and one doesn't know when the need's going to be there. We were well supported by the Australian Grand Lodges when we had the Christchurch earthquakes quite a number of years ago. And, you know, there's always a disaster somewhere on the line, and we can link together and support each other. Then we're doing what we're set up to do as Freemasons, haven't we? Yeah,
and I can distinctly remember that, because I was attending the Grand Lodge installation in Tasmania, looking at the television set, and I was looking at Christchurch, and they showed I think the Grand Chancellor Hotel. I said, I'll be staying there in a couple of weeks. And there it was, leaning on its side against the building next to it. And I said, I don't think I'll be staying there somehow. So,
well, the lodge room I'm sitting in at the moment was built around the time of the earthquake. So it's a fine structure, nice lodge room. There's about 12 or 13 lodges meet here. And it was really the outcome of change in Christchurch with the quality of the buildings and the design of buildings. So as I think Paul Holland made the comment in the video you did with him last week, there's always a gift in these things, so it's always good.
Yep. And how is Freemasonry in New Zealand going? You've obviously been a very well-prepared country. I think you and Taiwan are leading in the world of eradicating this, but how is the Brethren of New Zealand going?
We're doing all right. I think we have the advantage of being a small country, and we have a single border, which is an island nation in many regards. So like everybody else, we went through the March announcement that we had to lock up and stay home. We had 11 weeks of that, and I made the comment the other day that I was installed as the Grand Master in November of last year, and my first action as Grand Master was to shut all the lodges down. which was something that I agonised over, but I knew in my heart it was the right thing to do. So we had no Freemasonry in New Zealand for 11 weeks, and we used the same technology that you're using now to communicate with our brethren. I did a weekly video chat to everybody, 4 or 5 minutes long each time, just keeping everybody informed. And then, of course, the advantage of our country's no contact tracing through the community at the moment means that we could reopen our lodges. So we reopened on the 1st of June, and so we're now into our second month of Freemasonry back to normal. But that's brought its own challenges as well. We've had to do a lot of catch-up work. A lot of installations were missed, so we had to do a few dispensations to get people back on board. But more importantly than that was to educate people that we need to make sure the virus doesn't come back again, and we need to look after our brethren, particularly the older brethren, and get Freemasonry back up and running to get the connection with our membership. And that seems to be working quite well.
Was there any direct problems with your membership? Did anybody contract the COVID-19 or pass away from it?
To the best of my understanding, we had one Freemason that was tested positive, but that's the only one I've heard of, and I didn't know that at the time. And like a lot of people, I think the publicity around who's been tested positive and who's in quarantine has not been publicly named, and I think that's probably a good thing in many ways. Yeah. But it was just a passing comment that one of our brethren in the North Island had tested positive, but had recovered well and was back to normal. We did go through the hiccup of a lot of the older brethren, mainly from their own families, not being very happy that the man of the house was going back into a lodge room and being unsure about the community connection with other people. But we insisted that each lodge, before they reopened, have in place a mitigation plan. And then the Grand Lodge of New Zealand supplied to all those lodges a set of rubber gloves, hand cleanser, and a whole lot of bits and pieces to help the lodges kick things off. So I think they've picked up the culture of what we're trying to do. I've been to a couple of lodge meetings now, and you'll find hand sanitizers as you walk in the door, and the lodge is working proactively to get back to normal. I must say, I've not been into a lodge room yet where somebody's been wearing a face mask. So I think New Zealand is probably quite fortunate at the moment, and I count our lucky stars for that.
And we've got what we call day lodges that meet in the day. Usually the brethren that are a lot older that don't go out at night time anymore, they're a couple of those lodges are thinking about going to recess until, for at least another 6-12 months until a vaccine's been found. And we've got to support them fully, and even individuals. We've got several members that have got their wives or family members that are very ill, and they don't want to risk of going out there until there is a vaccine, so which we have to fully understand that. And that's what my concern was when I put the suspension in March the 17th, that I didn't want to lose one Freemason due to COVID-19. No. And I think that the individual members themselves are more important than Freemasonry as a whole. But that even if we did come back too early and something went wrong, there would be a massive amount of bad publicity for Freemasonry. And apart from our members getting affected, it would probably kill off our craft as a decent charitable organisation, and people concentrate on the wrong things. So, but my first primary aim was the individual members to make sure they stayed healthy.
Yeah, look, I totally agree with what you're saying. We were very careful, and in fact, when I announced that lodges could reopen and get back to normal, we gave quite a bit of latitude to each lodge to make their own decisions. And I was quite comfortable if a lodge decided that they wouldn't reopen until September, October. I was comfortable with that. And what I guess my philosophy there was to give them ownership of their own decisions. What I did want to make sure happened, and it has happened, is that those brethren who don't want to come to a lodge meeting because they are still worried or have a compromise in their own health, that the lodges have stepped up and they are looking after those brethren extremely well. And I must say too, during the lockdown, Peter, that we had a lot of our younger, newer members actually stepped up and looked after the older brethren as well by picking up their groceries, running the errands for them, doing the lawns, and doing things that really showed that Freemasonry was strong in our country. So I was very, very pleased of that. It was interesting too. I took the opportunity to telephone some of our newer brethren, particularly those that had been initiated either late last year or early in this year, most of them were surprised to get a phone call from the Grand Master, but they were encouraged to be engaged and were really looking forward to getting back into lodge, and they were all keen to look after the elder brethren and make sure that everybody was safe in their community. So there were some really good things that came out of that, and I was over the moon, very pleased.
And we've also seen the same thing here, is the same feeling. I set up a Masonic assistance program and got about 20 volunteers to help out anybody that calls Grand Lodge and says, like, we need assistance, and they were willing to go out. This is right across the state.
Yep.
And we didn't need them at all, because the lodges were actually doing it themselves, exactly what's supposed to happen with Freemasons in distress. You help out your fellow brother. The lodges themselves have been in contact with everybody. It's actually improved the communication between lodges and their members. But we've also had some of the younger guys organising Zoom meetings and keeping communications, having lectures, just keeping people interested. And we've actually got a whole stack of people lined up that want to join Freemasonry. And I put a challenge out there that I want to see 100 new members between now and the end of this year on the books, because we've got so many members lined up. But we're lucky in Western Australia, with our Premier's got a very hard line on the borders, keeping out all those nasty people from the eastern states. I shouldn't say that. But
I understand, Peter, that you're about to go back into lodge, or have you already done that?
No, we're not allowed to go back yet. We were just about to on the 19th of July, but because of what happened in Victoria, the Premier deferred it. He was actually going to what we call Phase 5, which is a clearing of all restrictions across the board except for the hard borders, which means life gets back to normal. And that was originally intended for July 19, and we had something in plan for the Freemasons to come back to do certain stages, social distancing, contact tracing, cleaning halls, doing all that. But when he said all restrictions will be lifted, well, it defeated the purpose for doing that for 2 weeks and then having all the restrictions lifted. So we originally said we're going back on the 19th, and he deferred that to the 1st of August. That decision will be made this Friday, whether we will be going back to what we call Phase 5. And that means that we can go back to normal living right across the state, except for the hard borders, keeping people out. So if that happens, it'll help our economy, it'll help our lodges. We may have to do things a little bit differently. I'm contemplating whether we will just cancel installations, because we've had about more than 50% of our lodges would have had installations during the suspended period, and it'd be a logjam at the end of the year to have them in, say, 2 or 3 months. And because we have our grand team attending every lodge installation across the state, it'll be virtually impossible. Our Grand Lodge office isn't open fully yet. We've still got restrictions here because of the financial impact that's hit us. So hopefully lodge life will return on the 1st of August, but it will be purely for lodge meetings and ceremonies, no installations at this stage. And I've just got to make a decision about that later on, and that will probably become public in Western Australia probably in the next 1 or 2 days. But this podcast won't go live that quickly, but I'll probably be making that decision later on this afternoon and let them know. Yeah.
Look, I wish you well on that, Peter. It's certainly a challenging time for us all. But one of the lessons that I've learned after 11 weeks or almost 12 weeks of being locked down in New Zealand, Freemasonry in New Zealand doesn't appear to have suffered. We did give that flexibility to the lodges to make up their own mind as to whether they went back. We had a process in place for installation as to whether the master would carry on and do a second year, or whether they wanted to hold an installation. And in fact, we did something quite unique the other day. We had 2 lodges do their installations together. I said it was a one-off and wouldn't happen again, but just because of the compressed area of a remote rural area of New Zealand, I gave the lodges the opportunity to come together and do an installation ceremony for 2 different lodges. And it was interesting because one was a past master going back in the chair, and the other was a brother going into the chair for the first time. And each part of the ceremony, although it took longer, was separate and distinct, which was really, really good. But it did assist the brethren in the terms that they didn't have to travel twice to go to similar meetings 1 week apart, long distance and away from home. So I think one of our advantages was that flexibility and saying, look, we understand your situation. We'll do these things one-off. don't take it as a given for next year, but we want to make sure that you get your Freemasonry up, you reconnect with your lodges, and you get back in the room with your friends.
And we'd actually had the same thing apply here. One of the lodges that wanted to do a installation at the end of August, when we originally were going to come back on the 19th of July. And one was from Port Edel and one was from Karratha, and they were actually going to have their installation the same day, the same time. One was a past master going back in for the third time, and the other one was a master mason, exactly the same situation, and they went through that with me. But we've just also, on my initiation, have approved, before COVID-19 came about, where you install 2 masters into a lodge. We've had a situation where some guys, like one suffers from cerebral palsy. He couldn't actually take on the role. He wouldn't take on the role as a active worship master himself. He's been through every other position, qualifies in every way. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to, on the day a past master is going to continue in the chair, but we're also going to install him as a master of the same lodge. So he can actually go on the honour board, he can actually recognition at any stage, he can actually then control a lodge in his own right because he's been installed as a master. Not a conferred master, he'll actually go through the whole installation process. And we've got some other guys that have, elderly guys that have been 80, 90 years old that have never been in the chair, and they can be included and go through. So at least they actually have the honour of being officially put in the chair and made a master of their lodge. They might not practically ever rule a lodge, but they will then have the opportunity, if it ever comes up, just for their own gratification. So we thought we should honour those guys and try and get them through as well. And we also got fly in, fly out guys that all of a sudden can't come to regular meetings. We can have 2 of those go into the chair and they can job share the master's role over 12 months. So, and he can come back and later on and do a full-time job later on. We can, so.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing? Because it's an interesting time. I recall many years ago, before I was in the craft, one of our Prime Ministers, Sir Keith Holyoake, was a Freemason, but had never gone into the chair. And of course, when he became the Prime Minister, there was a desire to have him installed as our Grand Master. They never actually called him a Grand Master. He became the Grand Patron, I think. But they took him through the honorary degrees of putting him in the chair. So what you're talking about there is almost a similar process to something done 20, 30 years ago.
Well, I think the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of England went straight through as well. I think he was only a Freemason for 2 or 3 years before he became the Grand Master.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So
it just shows that you can adapt to what the needs of the time are and all that sort of thing. I think we will take lessons out of this experience in the same ways that we did in Christchurch from earthquakes, from the mosque shootings, the bad weather we've had over the last few months in particular, your bushfires over there, and the disasters that we all go through. As Paul said in the last interview with you, there's a gift in all of those things, and it's about the survival and doing things that suit the membership, that the brethren can still enjoy their Freemasonry, and I think that will continue for years to come. And
one thing I get a little bit frustrated with, I get to see it so often, is the generosity of Freemasons from around the world, and you'd really want to bottle it up and then sell it out to the public that aren't Freemasons to show them this is what true Freemasonry is about. This is what we are. And we're not some secret organisation organising how to run a country or take over a government. We're actually here to help each other out. And it doesn't matter if you're a Freemason or non-Freemason, you will still receive the benefit of our charity. And I just really get frustrated we can't get that out enough.
Yeah. Well, it's the same comment you might recall at the grand installation when I was installed as Grand Master. I did say then that I wanted to connect with our communities and get to be seen as an important fabric of the community, where people knew that you were Freemasons and they knew what you did. Not so important knowing that you're a Freemason, but knowing that the Freemasons actually support their community and do things in the community that add value to the community and are important in the community. And I think, unfortunately, we get locked down with a secret society still that we know it's not a secret. Some of the biggest secrets we've got are the things that we do for charity, but nobody's really interested in that. They want to know what a handshake's like and what other things we do that are mysterious. But the true secrets of Freemasonry are the good things that we do.
Yeah, and I think in the media point of view, the good news doesn't sell, bad news does. So.
No, that's always the case, isn't it? Sadly, but that's, and I think we just need to work our way through that. Certainly that's what I want to do here. In fact, I've got a workshop coming up with the District Grand Masters to work on changing culture and to actually connecting better with the community. So that's a bit of work in progress, but we're running 12 weeks behind. I did really want to do that earlier in the year, but this COVID virus got in the way again. So we're sort of running 12 weeks behind, as I said, but we'll pick that up. And hopefully, as we get through this year, we'll get some runs on the ladder in terms of our pathway to some changes.
And how are you enjoying your retirement?
Wow, it's interesting. I haven't quite got my head around it yet. I'm in my third week as a retired person. And I said to somebody the other day that I've been working since I was 15. So it's quite strange not to actually have a job to go to, but there's enough to do in Freemasonry as the Grand Master. So I'm sort of pleased about that. But being unemployed just has a sort of a funny sound to it at the moment. So I've got to get my head around that a little bit more.
You're not unemployed, you're retired.
I think in terms of relaxation, it's got its advantages. I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah, you're retired, you're not unemployed. There's a big difference.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, I know what you're saying, but it's just that experience of having worked for so long and in a job that I really enjoyed, and the people I worked with, and catching up with those colleagues for a coffee and a chat is still an important part of what I do. But I think now that Freemasonry's back up and running in New Zealand, I'll be out and about more, so I'll have plenty to do. So I won't be going through those withdrawal symptoms as well. But retirement doesn't sound right yet.
Well, when you do go out and about, please pass on my best wishes and the best wishes from the brethren and the citizens of Western Australia to all your brethren, and thank them personally for us for the great contribution they've helped us out with in Western Australia and also the other states as well. I'm sure they would like me to join in with that as well. The Australians typically know that when things get tough, there's always our brothers across the ditch, the New Zealanders, will be at our shoulder, fighting side by side and helping us out. So please pass on our thanks and our gratitude.
I'll certainly do that, Peter. I was absolutely delighted. As you probably know, I love my rugby over here, and I was watching the Western Force playing a game the other night, and I thought, this is rugby as I know it from many years ago. So I was pleased to see your team up and running again.
So are we, but we have a couple of wins be even better, but at least they're not getting thrashed. So that's a good sign. Twiggy Forest will be very happy.
I think there's a couple of Kiwis in your team as well. I can't remember, but I was pleased to see you playing anyway.
Yes, there are. Ex-Kiwis, they have to live here now.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Most Worshipful Brother Graham, thank you very much for joining with this, and we look forward to maybe organising a conference like this, and then we might do a joint podcast with all the Grand Masters if we can, but we'll probably get a electronic conference together, and because we missed the one in Victoria, and that might help out, and we can communicate across between our two countries even further.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, Peter, thanks for the opportunity to talk to you through this medium. It's a great experience. I love the opportunity, and let's pass on my best wishes to you and your family as well. And to all your brethren, and I wish you well for the future when you reopen the lodges and get back in the lodge room, but I'm sure we'll talk before then.
Thanks, Graham, and appreciate it, and all the best to you and the brethren and everybody in New Zealand.
Thank you very much, Peter. Great to talk to you.